16 years. That is how long Viktor Orbán governed Hungary. And on April 12, 2026, that era ended, not gradually, not ambiguously, in a landslide. Péter Magyar and his TISA party won 138 of 199 seats in parliament, a two-thirds supermajority, the kind of majority that allows a government to amend the constitution itself. Turnout was nearly 80%, the highest since Hungary's first free elections in 1990. By any measure, this was a historic result. If this is the kind of analysis you're looking for, subscribe. I do this every week. But before we get into what this means, there is a question worth asking. Why does Hungary matter so much? Hungary has a population of fewer than 10 million people. Its economy, while functional, is not amongst Europe's largest. On paper, it is a mid-sized country in Central Europe. And yet, for the past several years, Hungary has generated more political attention in Brussels, in Washington, and in international media than countries many times its size. The reason is institutional. Within the European Union, influence is not simply a function of economic weight or population. On certain categories of decisions, like, for example, foreign policy, security, key budget matters, the European Union requires unanimity. Every member state has a vote, and every member state can block a decision that the other 26 support. Orbán understood that mechanism better than almost any other European leader. A country of 10 million people, positioned strategically and willing to use its institutional leverage, can shape the agenda of a bloc of 450 million. That is why Hungary mattered. That is why this election matters. Orbán's government maintained a distinctive position within the European Union, one that created sustained friction with Brussels on questions of governance, rule of law, and Hungary's relationship with Russia. The European Commission has already signaled that it expects a reset in relations with Hungary. Funds suspended over governance concerns are likely to be reviewed. And within NATO, Hungary's alignment with the broader alliance is expected to shift under Magyar's leadership. For a continent navigating an active war on its eastern border, this is not a symbolic change. It alters the internal arithmetic of European decision. To understand why that matters, it is worth explaining how the European Union actually makes certain decisions. On decisions of foreign policy, security, and key budget matters, the European Union requires unanimity, meaning every member state must agree. A single country can block a decision that other 26 support. Orbán's government used that mechanism with notable frequency on aid packages to Ukraine, on sanctions against Russia, on European Union decisions where Hungary's vote became a part of a broader negotiation over the release of funds to Budapest itself. The result was a pattern that other member states described in varying terms, like transactional, obstructionist, or simply the exercise of a legal right. What is not contested is that this definitely complicated European decision making at a moment when speed and coherence were particularly consequential. With Magyar in government, that dynamic is expected to shift significantly. Magyar has committed to a more constructive relationship with the European Union on Ukraine and to reducing Hungary's energy dependence on Russia by 2035. However, his position is pragmatic rather than unconditional. He opposes fast-tracking Ukraine's European Union's membership, a position that distinguishes him from some of Hungary's European partners. What Magyar represents for Ukraine is therefore a meaningful change from Orbán, but not necessarily a complete realignment with the European Union's current position on the war. Now, to understand the full weight of what ended on April 12th, we need to look at what Orbán actually built over 16 years. His administration constructed a distinctive governance model, one that restructured state institutions, reconfigured media ownership, and embedded a specific political vision into the architecture of Hungarian society. That model was deliberate, systematic, and deeply embedded. And it will not dissolve simply because an election was produced with a different result. Orbán himself made that clear. Following his defeat, he vowed to reorganize his party and remain a significant political force. He told his supporters that the work was just beginning. Magyar's two-thirds majority gives him a significant legislative power, but a political movement with deep institutional roots and a loyal base does not disappear with an election result. Magyar will be governing in a presence of a reorganizing opposition. That is the political reality he inherits. And then, who is Péter Magyar exactly? Magyar's political trajectory is itself part of the story. He spent years within the Fidesz political party before breaking with Orbán in 2024 and building an opposition movement from scratch. In under 2 years, he went from political outsider to prime minister elect. That is a remarkable trajectory by any measure. What Hungary voted for is change, not necessarily change in direction, not necessarily change in ideology. Magyar represents a center-right vision of Hungary, but one oriented toward Europe, anti-corruption, and institutional reform. His manifesto focuses on restoring democratic checks and balances, unlocking frozen European Union funds, and reducing energy dependence on Russia by 2035. He has committed to pragmatic relations with Moscow, not confrontational, but no longer as close as the ones that Orbán used to have. His campaign was deliberately focused on economic concerns like living standards, healthcare, and corruption, and that focus reflected a broader reality. Hungary's economic stagnated in 2025 with a GDP growth of just 0.3%, investment declining sharply, and inflation remaining persistently above target. Whether that focus reflects his governing priorities or simply his electoral strategy is a question that his time in office will answer. And within Orbán's legacy, there is one dimension worth noting specifically. His government introduced some of the most discussed natalist policies in Europe. Women who had 4 or more children were exempted from income tax for life. Subsidized loans were available to young couples, partially forgiven with each child born. This was presented as family policy and economic support for motherhood, but it also represents a significant example of a state using financial architecture to shape demographic outcomes, and by extension, to shape the conditions under which women make professional and reproductive decisions. Magyar's manifestos includes commitment on gender equality in the workplace. But what his government will do with this inherited architecture, reform it, it will maintain it, or redirect it, it remains an open question. If this is making you think, hit the like button. It will help other people to find this conversation. So, what does this election actually mean? Even under significant institutional pressure, Hungarians voted, and the result held. That definitely matters. It means that Europe's internal balance has shifted, with implications for the European Union, for NATO, and for the management of the war in Ukraine. And it means that Hungary enters a period of transition, whose depth and pace will depend not only on Magyar's intentions, but on the institutional capacity he inherits and the political opposition he faces. 16 years of governance do not reverse in one election cycle. The question is not whether things will change. They definitely will. The question is how much, how fast, and through what process. What do you think? Is this election a genuine inflection point for Hungary and for Europe? Or does 16 years of institutional change make transformation slower than the moment suggests? I want to hear from you in the comments. This is the Warm Talks. Subscribe for weekly analysis on power, politics, and the forces shaping our world.